Welcome to Small Business, Big Network, the podcast for small business owners who want big results from their networking. I'm Liz Drury, a freelance voiceover artist who knows that if you're not working, then networking could help. Jack Allen is the owner of Innate Creative Productions, an agency that produces radio adverts, video content, graphic design and so on. He's also one of the presenters of the Loose Dads podcast, which came about through networking. Thank you very much for being my podcast guest, Jack.
No worries, great to be here, Liz.
So, Jack, you run Innate Creative Productions and you do things like writing radio ads and video content. How did you get into this industry?
To be frank, by getting fired. So I came up as a radio producer, working for Heart. I was a station producer, but did a lot of work with The Breakfast Show. It was down in Kent, so it was James Hemming and Charlie O'Brien were the presenters. And I did a lot of the day production stuff, so, you know, maybe writing the funny songs or, doing bits of the creative stuff for the show. And I did that for a few years and absolutely loved it. But one of the things I was doing was the video side. And as I sort of was trying to progress within the organisation, it became clear that I was going to have to look elsewhere, especially if I wanted to follow something video related. So I went to a small agency in Dartford and did video for them. Ended up having to leave, shall we say, that organisation. Getting a job in London for a few years, left there, and became head of production for a small agency in Reading, and then had to leave there as well, and ended up being in a position where I had a 4-month-old baby boy, and a mortgage and all this sort of stuff, and had to do something about it, you know. So I started my own business, pulling together everything I'd done over the years, be that audio production, video production, animation, copywriting, graphic design. You know, when you work at small agencies, you have to put on lots of different hats, and so suddenly I had all these hats and no hat rack, if you like. So started my own thing, and went from there, really, and it's just gone from strength to strength.
And how long ago was that?
That was 4 years ago now, I think.
Right. And yeah, having a baby and a mortgage to pay kind of concentrates the mind a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, doesn't it just? I'd always dreamt of starting my own thing, but never really thought it would happen. You know, the timing was never right. And luckily I was pushed into a position where I had to make it right.
Yeah.
And,
I think
it's worked out nicely.
It's funny how often that happens, that we get pushed into doing something or into growing something. So for me, redundancy meant that I had to grow my voiceover business. And it's amazing how many other freelance people and small business owners you meet who have been in exactly the same position. You know, when everything's sort of comfy and cozy, we don't want to step out of our comfort zone. It's when we're forced to do it that we really have to make that leap. Yeah,
definitely.
And so how have things changed over the last 3 or so years you've been running your own business? How has it grown?
So I do a lot more video and animation now. I used to, so when I first started, a lot of my contacts were in radio. So I was writing a lot of radio ads, doing a lot of in-store radio. And as time's gone on, that side of what I do has got smaller and smaller. And I now have more clients and more agencies coming to me direct for the video work, because I seem to be, as a small agency myself, I seem to be hitting a price point with animation that isn't the tens of thousands that you'd be expecting from a big London agency, but it's also not as cheap as you might get if you went to Fiverr.com and got something from halfway across the world. So it's this nice balance, I think, that I strike, and that seems to be where I find most of my clients is through that niche.
Yeah. How did you find things last year when the pandemic hit and the lockdown happened?
I was a bit worried, I won't lie. I think when we had the first lockdown, my my inbox went very quiet for about a month. Just while people tried to figure out what was happening.
Yeah.
But after about a month, everyone realised they still had advertising budgets to spend. They still needed to bring money in.
Yeah.
And they were suddenly looking for different ways to do it. And that's where the animation side really, really picked up, because they couldn't get out to film promotional videos.
Yeah.
So, animation and motion graphics, you can have whatever you want happening on the screen. You want to go to space, you want a train going through a tunnel, whatever it is, it can happen. You're not confined by filming, and especially in a pandemic, you're not confined by the filming you can't do.
Yes.
So that picked up quite a lot, actually.
Yeah, I should think animation was a good thing to be in last year, because, like you said, there's no limits to it, whereas in-person filming was definitely very limited for a while.
Yeah, and also more people were doing, if it was people hosting events or conferences, they were doing more of it online.
Yeah.
And therefore needed more video content, more motion graphics content to satisfy viewers. You couldn't rely so much on the experience of being there. You had to make it an experience whilst sat at your own computer.
Yeah, absolutely. Something I love about your website is that you say that if we have to endure advertising, then we might as well enjoy it. And you like to make sure that your content isn't boring at all. How do you make sure that all your content is really engaging?
I really don't like using cliches where I can avoid it. And we've all been there. We've all sat there and listened to an ad or watched an ad and gone, "This is tedious. This is boring." So what I try and do when I'm writing, when I'm storyboarding, is I'm trying to think about the things that would make me sit up and take attention. You know? There was, and I can't remember the artist who said it, but there was a music artist who said, we make music that we like. If we like it, there's got to be someone else out there who likes it.
Yeah.
And I sort of take that approach to a lot of what I do. In that, if I find that funny, if I find that script I've written funny, then there's definitely other people who do.
Yeah.
There's got to be other people who do. And so I really try, when I'm sending initial ideas to a client, I'll try and send through a few different ones so that they have that, that out there idea that we used to use the phrase wacky bonkers at heart. They have that idea there, but then they also have a safe idea, and normally you meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And if I can get just a few of those little bits in, it helps to elevate the whole piece.
Yeah.
To not just be that boring. Have you had an accident at work?
Yeah, we all hate those, don't we?
Yes, yeah.
So what kind of clients do you work for? Do you find they're from particular sectors, or is it really broad?
It's really broad because most of what I do is white labelled. Mm-hmm. So I have relationships with other agencies who want to offer animation but don't have the abilities in-house. So I sort of come in as their animation department.
Yeah.
And I find that relationship works really well, actually. Personally, from a business point of view, it means I'm not spending all my time going out and finding new clients.
Yeah.
And having those sales-based conversations, because that's not my strength. And from their point of view, it's a quality product, as I say, at a price point that works for them and the client.
Yeah.
So that tends to be what I do. Most of my stuff is that white labeling sort of stuff.
Now, as well as this, I know you also host a podcast. So tell me about your podcast and what it's about and who it's for.
So the podcast is called Loose Dads. It's four dads sat around a virtual table. It's all through Zoom. We started during the lockdowns, so we've only actually all met once in person. But it's four dads just sat around talking about dad stuff, really, things that affect us as parents, the news, and how that affects how our view of the world changes through those events, and answering questions from Dadsnet members. So Dadsnet's got a huge community of users on Facebook, and it's this really great supportive community where people go and they ask questions. It might be, what's the best doorbell to get, but it might be my kid won't eat anything I put in front of them. How do I help? What can I do? And so we try and tackle some of those from our point of view. We're not experts, we're just dads. And quite often it goes off the rails and we go off on tangents, and it becomes more like sitting with your mates down the pub, But how we met, as I say, it was all organised through lockdown. We all have some sort of connection to radio in our pasts.
Yeah.
And I think most of us had a connection to one particular presenter who works behind the scenes on this. And so basically it's through networking that we have this one connection that then put us all in touch with each other to form this podcast panel. So I know them. He's actually the husband of the breakfast presenter I used to work with, Charlie.
Yeah.
So I was at their wedding. I know him. I know them quite well. But other people on the panel have worked with him previously, or may have just met him through a friend, that sort of stuff. And yeah, he put us all in touch with the founder of Dadsnet, who put together this panel, and it's gone from strength to strength.
So it's kind of a mixture then of sort of professional and personal networks that have brought this together. Yeah,
definitely. I think that's quite often the way with networks, isn't it? You start in a professional capacity, and then the longer you work with someone, the longer you know them, it inevitably comes a bit personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely, but it's been really interesting. As I say, four blokes who'd never met each other before. We met in London a couple of months back now. That was the first time we'd all seen each other face to face. So the first time we could get a gauge on how tall everyone was.
Yes. Yeah. So what kind of topics do you discuss? You mentioned like getting your kids to eat and that kind of thing. Do you get questions coming from your listenership?
Yeah. So we've got a Facebook group of our own called Loose Dads Podcast, and so sometimes we have people ask questions in there, or quite often they'll be provided by the founder of Dadsnet, who says, "Oh, I saw this question come in. This would be a really good one to chat about." And get everyone's views on. So we've done stuff from how to get your kids to sleep in their own bed, to fussy eaters, to we did recently how old does your oldest child have to be to look after your youngest child without you there? Stuff like that. And we've our kids are all a range of different ages, so you do get some different views on it, which is nice.
Yeah. And how often do you put an episode out?
It's once a week. Once a week on a Friday. Our episodes go live.
And what sort of length are the episodes typically?
We aim for 40 minutes. But sometimes if one of us is waffling on, or we get particularly caught up in a subject, then they can go up to an hour or so. But they're quite nice, commutable sort of listens.
Yeah.
I like to think they are anyway.
Yeah. And so before you started your podcast, did you have a look to see what else was out there in terms of something similar?
So in my day job, I do so much of this sort of stuff, production and, making sure everything's right, looking at what the competition is doing and this, that and the other. In this instance, I thought I might take a step back here. I'm going to let Dadsnet do the legwork on what else is out there, and then tell us what they need from us. It's my first time in front of the mic, or behind the mic rather, instead of off to the side making gestures and telling people to wrap links up. So it's quite nice to take that step back and focus on the presenting side of it, focus on what I've got to do,
Yeah. And how many people do you get listening, do you know?
Well, we've just reached, I think a couple of episodes ago, we had our 10,000th listen.
Brilliant.
And we've got about 40 something episodes out now.
Yeah.
So it's quite good, and we've got quite a loyal listener base as well, which is really nice. You can start to interact with your listeners through the podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is really lovely.
And do you think that the guys that are listening to your podcast, do you think they're getting information about being a dad from anywhere else, or do you think this has sort of provided something that's really accessible to them that they might not have looked for before?
I think one of the biggest things it provides is that sense of not being alone.
Yeah.
I think being a dad can be quite isolating, because, in a traditional setup, you're relied on to go to work, bring in the money, come home, spend what little time you can with your kids before they go to bed, and then do the jobs in the evening, ready to go back out to work the next day. And so I think you don't get a lot of time to talk to other dads.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do, we're very open about mental health, and about our relationships and about just the situations we're in, because that's sort of what Dadsnet's about, is just knowing you're not alone.
Yeah.
So it might be like divisive views on politics. We've got left-wing views, right-wing views, all this sort of stuff covered. And if you're a dad, you're listening and going, "Oh, I'm not the only one who thinks like that.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one who thinks, oh, it's difficult being a dad sometimes." And I think that can be quite invaluable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is very stereotypical, but when my kids were little and I was going to toddler groups and play groups and the like, it was nearly always all women. There was maybe one or two men very occasionally.
Yeah.
And so, of course, the women get that opportunity to discuss what's going on in their home life. And the men really miss out on that. Yeah,
definitely. And I think it plays a huge part in men's mental health.
Yeah.
That feeling like you're alone, feeling like you're not allowed to think it's difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Being a parent is hard. It's
Yeah.
hard work. And I've got 2 toddlers, and I love them to bits, but they drive me absolutely mad sometimes. and this podcast is a place where we can go and hear other dads say the same thing and go, okay, all right, I'm not a bad dad, I'm just a human.
So what kind of age are the kids that the other dads have who are on the podcast?
So Sparky, his little boy is 18 months or so. Jim's got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, and then Brad's, I think, are 6 and 9 or 7 and 10, around those sort of ages. Yeah.
And do you see the podcast continuing as your kids grow up, and maybe you'll be still doing it when they're teenagers?
I hope so, yeah. As long as people are finding it useful, and as long as Dadsnet are still happy to support it, then yeah, I don't see a reason we wouldn't.
Yeah, well, it doesn't get any easier, let me tell you. It just gets different.
Yes, yeah, that's what I've heard, is that the worries just become different.
Yes, they're now taking my car out.
Right, yeah.
That's the worry I have these days. Now that sounds brilliant. And so what? Obviously you're planning to carry on with the podcast. Tell me what plans you've got for your business as well.
Well, I've just through networking, I wanted to bring this up a bit, but a lot of the clients I've come by through LinkedIn, strangely enough. It might be that I have a tenuous connection with this person from years back in radio, but a couple of my big clients I approached that way, added them there, started talking, and started producing animations for them. And then what I'm seeing is that as people, media is quite a high turnover industry, staff-wise. Mm-hmm. So you're always talking to different marketing people. And I'm finding that as people move from the companies where I've worked with them, they're now going to their new agencies and saying, "Oh, I've got this animation guy. Let's use Innate."
Yeah.
And so I've now got a new couple of agencies that are coming on board and starting to use me. So I'm just sort of growing that way, building the number of clients I've got, and I'm sort of seeing where it takes me at the moment. My kids are 2.5 and 3.5 basically, and I'm just enjoying being able to work from home and see them and watch them grow up.
Yeah.
That's what's the most important for me at the moment, is to have that real work-life balance. When I was working in London and my little boy was, a newborn, I was seeing him for 20 minutes if I was lucky when I got home, or he'd be in bed. Yeah. And as it stands now, they'll walk into my study, bring me some tractors, I'll take half an hour to just go and play and, satisfy myself and them. And then I can get back to work later on.
It's all about the tractors at that age, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they're so into tractors. We live in Norfolk and constantly at the moment we're just driving past tractor after tractor after tractor, combine harvester, carrot harvester, whatever it is. They absolutely are in their element.
Yeah, it's similar here. I'm in North Lincolnshire, which is pretty rural. Right. And when my son was born, my older child was 2, and I remember this day about this time of year, and I was having a really bad day, and the kids were screaming. I was like, right, everybody, get in the car, we're going to look for tractors. And I just drove them around the countryside looking for combine harvesters and tractors, and they were asleep within about 20 minutes.
Oh, perfect, yeah.
So, yeah, all about the tractors. I remember those days.
What I do find, though, is that I'm driving along on my own, and I'll go, "Oh, John dear. Oh, that's a Massey Ferguson."
Yeah, done that. Then you feel slightly silly.
Yes, yeah.
So just coming back to the networking again, I think it's so much easier now, isn't it, with all the online networks like LinkedIn that you've mentioned, and so many things have been on Zoom over the lockdown. Have you been using those kind of networks too, where people have been meeting on Zoom?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've met new clients, completely fresh business, all happened over Zoom and through phone calls and emails. What a time to be doing this and to be able to work from home. It's part of the reason we moved to Norfolk. We were living near Reading, and it became abundantly clear that I didn't need to be anywhere near London. Yeah. I never went into London to see London clients, so it was all done over the internet. So why did we need to be paying London prices?
Yeah, quite.
So we moved out here and haven't looked back since.
Brilliant. So finally, Jack, if people want to get in touch with you, either to find out more about the podcast or to find out about Innate Creative Productions, how can they get hold of you?
They can head to innateproductions.co.uk. So Innate is INNATE. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jack Allen. LinkedIn's great for networking. So, or you can head to the podcast page on Facebook, which is Loose Dads Podcast, or just type Loose Dads into wherever you get your podcast.
Brilliant.
Wherever you found this one, really.
Yes. Yes, they're all in all the same places.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you very much for being my guest, and best of luck for the future.
Thanks so much for having me on, Liz. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Small Business, Big Network. If you found this podcast useful, please do rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to share it with the rest of your network too.